Imagine powering on your computer in the year 2026 and being greeted not by a cluttered desktop full of compromises, but by a refined, intelligent, fast, and deeply personal Linux desktop environment that feels like it was designed specifically for you. The Linux desktop in 2026 is no longer the alternative option or the for enthusiasts only choice. It has evolved into a serious, mainstream, and competitive platform that challenges Windows and Mac OS, not only in philosophy, but also in polish, usability, and innovation. The story of Linux desktops in 2026 is not just about better themes or faster boot times. It is about a fundamental shift in how people interact with their computers, how software is delivered, how privacy is respected, and how communities shape the future of computing. One of the most important things to understand about Linux in 2026 is that the diversity of distributions has not disappeared. Instead, it has become more focused and more purposeful. Ubuntu continues to be one of the most widely recognized Linux distributions, serving as a gateway for millions of users entering the Linux ecosystem. Ubuntu in 2026 feels more cohesive than ever, with a refined GNOME-based desktop that emphasizes consistency, performance, and accessibility. Fedora remains the experimental edge of mainstream Linux, pushing forward new technologies such as Wayland enhancements, pipewire improvements, and next-generation security frameworks. Fedora in 2026 is still the place where many future Linux desktop technologies are tested before becoming standard across the ecosystem. Arch Linux continues to thrive as the distribution for users who want full control. In 2026, Arch Linux is no longer seen as hard in the traditional sense. Installation processes are more guided, documentation is even better, and tools have matured. Arch Linux in 2026 is about customization, minimalism, and building a system that reflects your exact workflow. Debian remains the rock-solid foundation for countless systems, including servers, desktops, and embedded devices. Debian in 2026 continues to prioritize stability and reliability, making it a favorite for users who want a system that simply works for years without surprises. Linux Mint still stands as one of the most beginner-friendly Linux distributions. Linux Mint in 2026 focuses heavily on comfort, familiarity, and productivity. Its Cinnamon desktop environment feels like a perfected version of the classic desktop metaphor, blending traditional layout with modern visual polish. Pop_OS continues to be the darling of developers, creators, and power users. Pop_OS in 2026 builds on its tiling window manager features, advanced GPU handling, and seamless workflow design, making it one of the best Linux distributions for people who live inside code editors, terminals, and creative applications. NixOS has grown dramatically in popularity by 2026. NixOS introduces users to declarative system configuration, reproducible builds, and atomic upgrades. While it once seemed intimidating, NixOS in 2026 offers more approachable tools and graphical interfaces that make its powerful model accessible to everyday desktop users. openSUSE continues to shine with its YIST configuration tools and strong KDE Plasma integration. openSUSE in 2026 offers both a stable Leap edition and a rolling release Tumbleweed edition, giving users the choice between reliability and cutting-edge updates. Elementary OS maintains its focus on design elegance and simplicity. Elementary OS in 2026 feels like a Linux distribution built for people who appreciate aesthetics and thoughtful user experience. Its Pantheon desktop environment emphasizes clarity, minimal distractions, and intuitive interaction. EndeavourOS carries forward the Arch Linux spirit with an easier installation experience, making it a popular choice for users who want Arch Linux power without starting completely from scratch. The desktop environments themselves have undergone massive evolution by 2026. GNOME in 2026 feels smoother, faster, and more cohesive than ever. Animations are fluid, memory usage is better optimized, and the interface adapts intelligently to different screen sizes and input methods. KDE Plasma in 2026 is often described as the most customizable desktop environment in the world, and that reputation is well earned. KDE Plasma offers deep personalization, from window behavior to panel layouts, from themes to animations, while still maintaining excellent performance. XFCE Mate and LXQT continue to exist for users who prefer lightweight desktops, but even these environments in 2026 look more modern and polished than their earlier versions. They prove that Linux desktops do not require heavy hardware to deliver a great experience. On a modest laptop or an older desktop PC, Linux in 2026 can still feel fast and responsive. One of the biggest transformations for Linux desktops in 2026 is the maturity of Wayland. Wayland has effectively replaced X11 as the default display server on most major Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, Fedora, and openSUSE. Wayland in 2026 offers better security, smoother graphics, and improved support for high DPI displays and multi-monitor setups. Screen tearing is largely a thing of the past. Touchscreens, stylus input, and fractional scaling work reliably. For users, this means fewer graphical glitches and a more consistent experience. Another major area of progress is application distribution. Flatpak, Snap, and AppImage technologies have matured significantly. Flatpak, in particular, has become a dominant method for distributing desktop applications across Linux distributions. Ubuntu, Fedora, Linux Mint, and Pop!_OS all support Flatpak extremely well in 2026. This means users can install the latest versions of applications without worrying about dependency conflicts or breaking their system. Snap packages continue to be central to Ubuntu's ecosystem, while AppImage remains popular for portable, single-file applications. This shift in application delivery has changed how people perceive software on Linux. In 2026, you no longer hear that app isn't available for Linux as often as you once did. Major applications such as web browsers, communication tools, creative software, and development environments all have strong Linux support. Even gaming has seen enormous growth. Steam on Linux in 2026 is a powerhouse, thanks to Proton and Vulkan. Many Windows games run on Linux with performance comparable to native Windows versions. Some developers even ship native Linux builds by default. Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, and Pop!_OS are frequently highlighted as excellent gaming Linux distributions in 2026. But Linux Mint, EndeavourOS, and openSUSE also provide excellent gaming experiences. Graphics drivers from NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel are more reliable and better integrated than ever before. Hardware detection works seamlessly in most cases. Plug in a controller, connect a headset, and start playing. Artificial intelligence and machine learning integration is another defining characteristic of Linux desktops in 2026. Many Linux distributions include optional AI-powered tools that assist with file organization, system maintenance, and even coding. On Ubuntu in 2026, for example, you might have an assistant that suggests system optimizations or helps troubleshoot issues. On Fedora in 2026, AI tools might assist developers with debugging and performance profiling. On Arch Linux and NixOS, advanced users can integrate AI tools directly into their workflows through scripts and terminal commands. Privacy remains one of the strongest selling points of Linux in 2026. Unlike proprietary operating systems that often collect telemetry by default, Linux distributions such as Debian, Linux Mint, Fedora, and Elementary OS continue to prioritize user control. You decide what data is shared, if any. For many users, this philosophy alone is enough to choose Linux. The Linux desktop in 2026 is also deeply influenced by community-driven development. Unlike closed ecosystems, Linux thrives on collaboration. Bugs are reported, patches are submitted, features are discussed openly. This creates a sense of ownership among users. When you use Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, or Linux Mint, you are not just consuming a product. You are participating in a global project. Hardware manufacturers have increasingly recognized the importance of Linux support. In 2026, it is far more common to find laptops and desktops shipping with Ubuntu, Fedora, or Linux Mint pre-installed. Companies like System76 continue to push Pop!_OS as a first-class operating system on their hardware. This growing hardware support means fewer driver headaches and better out-of-the-box experiences. The concept of a desktop itself is evolving. In 2026, Linux desktops seamlessly integrate with cloud services, mobile devices, and web applications without locking users into proprietary ecosystems. You can sync files, settings, and applications across devices while still maintaining control over your data. Ubuntu, Fedora, and openSUSE all offer tools for cloud integration that respect user privacy. Customization remains a cornerstone of Linux. Want your desktop to look like Mac OS? Plasma and GNOME can do that. Want it to look like Windows? Linux Mint and Cinnamon make that easy. Want something completely unique? Arch Linux and NixOS let you build your environment from the ground up. In 2026, this flexibility is not just for enthusiasts. User-friendly tools make customization accessible to everyone. Performance is another area where Linux desktops shine in 2026. Even on modest hardware, Linux Mint, XFCE-based distributions, and LXQT desktops run smoothly. On high-end machines, KDE Plasma and GNOME take advantage of powerful GPUs and CPUs to deliver stunning visuals and lightning-fast responsiveness. Boot times are fast, application launch times are quick, and system updates rarely require reboots. Security on Linux desktops in 2026 is robust. Sandboxing technologies, secure boot support, and regular security updates keep systems safe. Distributions like Fedora and Ubuntu implement modern security frameworks by default. NixOS offers atomic rollbacks, allowing users to revert their system to a previous state if something goes wrong. This level of safety and control is difficult to match on other platforms. For developers, Linux desktops in 2026 are arguably the best environment available. Native support for programming languages, containerization tools, virtualization, and DevOps workflows is unmatched. Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, and Pop!_OS are especially popular among developers. Tools like Docker, Podman, and Kubernetes integrate seamlessly. Coding feels natural on Linux. For creators, Linux desktops in 2026 offer a growing ecosystem of creative software. Video editing, graphic design, 3D modeling, and audio production tools are more powerful than ever. Many creators choose Ubuntu Studio or Fedora Workstation for their projects, while others customize Arch Linux or openSUSE with their preferred tools. Education is another area where Linux desktops are making a big impact. Schools and universities increasingly deploy Linux Mint, Ubuntu, and Debian on student machines. These distributions provide stable, cost-effective platforms for learning. Students gain exposure to open-source principles and real-world computing environments. The Linux desktop in 2026 is not perfect. There are still challenges. Some proprietary software remains unavailable. Some hardware edge cases still require manual tweaking. But the gap between Linux and other desktop operating systems has narrowed dramatically. What makes Linux desktops in 2026 truly special is not just technology, but philosophy. Linux represents freedom. Freedom to choose your distribution. Freedom to customize your environment. Freedom to inspect and modify your system. Freedom from forced upgrades and intrusive telemetry. When you look at Ubuntu in 2026, you see a polished mainstream Linux desktop that appeals to a broad audience. When you look at Fedora in 2026, you see innovation and future-focused development. When you look at Arch Linux in 2026, you see power and flexibility. When you look at Linux Mint in 2026, you see comfort and usability. When you look at Pop!_OS in 2026, you see productivity and workflow optimization. When you look at Debian in 2026, you see stability. When you look at NixOS in 2026, you see a radical new way of managing systems. When you look at openSUSE in 2026, you see balance. When you look at Elementary OS in 2026, you see elegance. Together, these Linux distributions form an ecosystem that is richer and more diverse than ever. The Linux desktop in 2026 is not about replacing Windows or Mac OS. It is about offering a compelling alternative that stands on its own merits. So when we talk about the future of desktop computing in 2026, we are really talking about choice, control, and community. We are talking about a world where your computer works for you, not the other way around. We are talking about Linux desktops that are fast, beautiful, secure, and empowering. And perhaps most importantly, we are talking about a future where anyone, anywhere, can download Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch Linux, Linux Mint, Pop!_OS, Debian, NixOS, openSUSE, Elementary OS, or any other Linux distribution, and take control of their digital life. That is the real future of Linux desktops in 2026.